Hi plant lovers, welcome back to my channel. If you're anything like me, you've probably accumulated a rainbow of colorful pots for your houseplants over time since the beginning of your plant journey. And they can look fun and add personality, right? Like I remember in the beginning when I started collecting plants, I would actually bookmark pottery shops online, check to see if they have any interesting pot design or unusual color, that sort of thing. But I started to feel that all this color can actually distract from the real star of the show, which is our plants. Because let's face it, the plants already bring a lot of color to the house. If you are somebody who like variegated type of plants and your coloration, if you happen to have some house plants and flowers, well, those flowers could also add color into your surrounding. I guess maybe I just feel like I'm suffering a little bit from like color fatigue. Anyways, but then the other thing I was also thinking about is maybe white pots could help our plant grow better. I don't know, it was just a thought. So as we know, what we perceive as a light is actually made up of ultraviolet light, visible light spectrum, and infrared light, and basically lights are just energy wavelength. So the color that are perceived by our eyes are actually the result of the visible light being either reflected and or absorbed by different surfaces and resulting in what we perceive to be red, yellow, green, blue, orange, So for example, here we have a mocha pot, and when light reaches the surface, the wavelengths for orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple gets absorbed, while the red is bounced back off of the surface. And as a result of that, we view this mocha pot as being red. Apologies for my very rudimentary graphic design on the image here. With regard to the color white, what we know is that when the visible light hit a surface that is white, this surface does not absorb any of the light, so all of them just kind of bounce back. That will also include the very beneficial light wavelength of the red and blue that are very crucial for photosynthesis. If I use predominantly white pots and paint my walls all white, could I maybe enhance the amount of scatter light that will reach the leaves of my plants? Because I live in the northern hemisphere and the winter here is super long, and as much as I try at this moment in my life, keep getting north-facing windows in my living arrangement, I never ever got to have a very nice big southern window. And I also am not in a position to place a whole bunch of grow light. It's my dream one day to have a very nice big southern facing window. Interestingly, when I try to look up information or Google about whether or not color of the pots will make a significant difference in the plant's health, I was surprised to learn that yes, while white pots could potentially reflect more lights back onto the leaves for photosynthesis, the amount of scattering light is actually very, very minimal. So in that regard, it doesn't seem like it's gonna make a whole lot of difference. So I was like, oh darn it, my theory is wrong. But I guess for me, from a perspective, is that every little bit helps for my plants. But on the other hand, it's also my preferred aesthetic. And I just thought that because the plants have their own unique coloration, their leaf maybe they're different leaf structure and stuff like that. So there's already a lot of visual clutter. So like having very, very nice and uniform white pot, and even the pots of all the same shape and sizes is what the aesthetic I want to be going for. However, that doesn't mean that white pot has no benefit. Its benefit is not what I thought it would be. So what my understanding is that because white pot reflect that light off, and light is basically energy, which typically when absorbed is turned into heat. The temperature at the root zone will have a difference when we use light color pot versus dark color pots. The lighter the color, the more light gets reflected off, so less energy gets retained within the pot. The root system tend to stay cooler, while a darker color pot will absorb more light and turning that energy into heat. That will keep the root zone like more on the warm side. I think in this case, it really depends on each person's growing environment, whether or not the environment is subjected to excessive heat or excessive cold, and maybe the seasonality also make a difference too. The most common example I could think of is that we tend to gravitate toward lighter color in the summer because that kind of helps us stay cool, while in the winter we try to grab darker color to keep us warm. Oh, and one more thing. So apparently, if there's too much light at the root zone, then it could actually inhibit the growth of the roots. However, I don't think this is necessarily a big debate between white or black pot. Probably the big differences will be like whether or not you have an opaque pot versus a translucent pot. Like say if you were to put them in a glass jar. There are some plants that have the ability to have a little bit of photosynthesis happen their roots, so like orchids or plants with aerial roots, and so the light on the roots does not make any differences. Yeah, so maybe that's why a lot of orchid nursery pot are translucent. So, ta-da! These are my plants, or primarily my orchids, that I have potted into white pots. This kind of aesthetic, keep everything uniform and allowing the top to do whatever they want. You can see on the left side, all the pots are even the exact same shape and sizes. But I'm also restricted by how wide my windowsill is. That's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching.